Public opinion is not driving United States policy on Afghanistan as much as efforts by politicians to keep the war from notice, which they've ensured by staging a moderate withdrawal without inducing tremendous change.
It could lead to the worst of all worlds, one where we retain enough of a presence for long enough to lose slowly and expensively, as opposed to quickly and more cheaply.
That's Stephen Biddle, a defense policy fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, an independent think tank headquartered in New York City. On October 7, 2011, the war in Afghanistan reached its 10th year, making it more than a year longer than the Vietnam War, now the second longest war in American history. A recent poll conducted by the Program on International Policy Attitudes shows that nearly 50% of Americans want troops withdrawn from Afghanistan completely. Nonetheless, as the debate season for the 2012 presidential election begins, candidates from both parties have avoided making the issue of Afghanistan an important one for American voters. Graham Klumpner, a member of Iraq Veterans Against the War, a national organization dedicated to mobilizing public support around ending the Iraq War, believes that politicians have so far been successful in limiting public discourse.
I don't think the mainstream media presents any image of the war in Afghanistan or the wars anywhere, really.
Klumpner says that a national conversation about how to create effective solutions in Afghanistan is stifled by the media's unwillingness to cover the violent body count stories that many people feel they have heard before.
Unless there's like a massive bombing where hundreds of people are injured or killed, or there's some sort of incredibly new dynamic to a story, the mainstream media doesn't cover it.
Klumpner says that this has hindered American citizens protesting the war in Afghanistan.
When you just keep reading 17 dead in a suicide bombing in Kirkuk or 22 dead in a car bomb in Kabul, it's difficult to continue to have any kind of emotional reaction. You have to numb yourself.
Biddle says that ramping up U.S. aid to Afghanistan's National Army and police forces made significant progress toward eroding Taliban control over important parts of the country, such as the southern provinces of Kandahar and Helmand. However, these recent gains have by no means stopped the violence that continues to ravage Afghanistan and demoralize the American public.
They have retained the ability to assassinate officials, bomb hotels, police stations, and launch occasional high-profile attacks like the recent ones on the U.S. Embassy and NATO headquarters in Kabul.
The primary objective in forcing changes on people in the government of Afghanistan is to promise that if they improve, the U.S. will protect them, but to threaten that if they don't, the U.S. will draw down.
The problem with calendar-driven gradual drawdowns is that they're completely independent of what Afghan officials do. Afghan officials look at this and they say, well, the United States is going to be out by 2014 regardless.
This creates enormous disincentive for Afghans to take risks, believing that they can have no influence on whether the Americans stay or leave. Michael McPherson is the national coordinator of United for Peace and Justice, a coalition of over 1,000 organizations dedicated to ending the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. He believes that the American public's sentiment about ending the wars has not diminished, but has changed in nature.
People now are out in the streets, but they're out in the streets over collective bargaining or budget cuts or, the things, once again, that affect them directly. And they're starting to make very strong connections to how those things are related to war spending.
Klumpner says that veterans need to lead the anti-war movement by reaching out to the majority of the American population that has not experienced war firsthand.
In our democracy, one of the only things that we have to maintain that democracy is our media. And if we don't have a public that is informed of how things are going and what they can do about it and how they can change it, which is, in my opinion, the media's role, its primary role as the fourth branch of government, then we don't have an ability to change things.
While public opinion has not been a driving force behind American actions in Afghanistan, this doesn't mean that American citizens should not strive to make their voices heard. Congresspeople respond to constituent mail and constituent views, and for informed members of the public who advocate a withdrawal strategy that's more conditional, saying so to your congressmen and senators can have an effect, says Biddle. In the meantime, President Obama stands committed to meeting the 10,000 troop withdrawal deadline that he set for the end of 2011. For War News Radio, I'm Sara Blazevic.